Thanks very much, Acting Gerry Horkan, and indeed thank you, Minister, for your opening statement. I suppose a lot of the heat in this has really been discussed when it was published yesterday, and I read some of the Dáil debates that were yesterday evening from the Dáil spokespersons on the summer economic statements, and indeed the Minister, Paschal Donohoe's response to some of them. I mean, I suppose the obvious thing here, Minister, is it's all really about Brexit. If Brexit goes okay, we might be all right, but if Brexit doesn't go okay, a no-deal Brexit or a hard Brexit, we're swinging from positive maybe 1 billion to negative maybe 5, a movement, as you've outlined, of about 6 billion. And I suppose in the context of the Irish Fiscal Advisory Council and how they've made their points that up between 3 and 6 billion of the 10.5 billion or thereabouts corporation tax as being relatively unstable, relatively, not guaranteed in any sense. There are certainly very uncertain and potentially choppy waters ahead, and that's not to take away from the positives that are there. I mean, we know we have almost full employment, and we know that we ran a surplus last year for the first time, and obviously Fianna Fáil, as involving the confidence supply agreement and playing their part in facilitating the minority government, are doing our bit to make sure that everything goes as well as it can. And certainly we did have the rainy day fund passed here last week, Minister, with the unanimous support of the House. And it is a very positive thing. It was in our manifesto back in 2015. It was part of the confidence supply agreement. I'm very happy that the government has, as part of their agreement with Fianna Fáil, secured that rainy day fund and put, I think there'll be 2 billion in it by the end of this year, and that's certainly a positive thing to have. But we also have challenges in terms of how we manage our capital projects and our revenue expenditure. We're seeing constant overruns in health year on year. I think last year was 650 million. We have the Children's Hospital overrun, we have the broadband overrun. Only 200 million, I think, of next year's 2.8 is going towards that, and then effectively we're kicking some of it down the road. So we have an awful lot of funding to find for things like the Children's Hospital and broadband in the longer term that are not part of these figures. The fiscal space, if you want to call it that, the Minister said there's 2.8 million, of which he's committed 2.1. Some people are saying that doesn't include the Christmas bonus, and if it does, that will eat up 300 million of the space. Others are saying it does. You might be able to confirm one way or the other whether the bonus is in these figures or it's not. But certainly, Minister, we need to make sure that we do pay a lot of cognizance to the fact that our corporation tax, and they're very welcome, don't get me wrong, if they were 20 billion or 30 billion, I'd be delighted. And in some ways, the only way we can protect ourselves from corporation tax is by having more and more people giving us corporation tax so we're less dependent on any particular one. And I know the Minister has announced a review of that, and I know some people would prefer if that was done externally, and I kind of understand the rationale that the Minister said about why it would be done internally but possibly independently validated. But the Fiscal Advisory Council, have pointed out very significant items in our national finances, pointing out, obviously, as I've outlined, about Brexit, but equally the 645 million in Department of Health last year, and that the government spending in 2018 breached the expenditure benchmark as laid down in domestic and EU fiscal rules. The government claims that no project is going to be impacted by broadband and the Children's Hospital, but clearly they're certainly going to be moved down the road and having to be delayed. So, Minister, really, it's very much a case of, I suppose, we don't really know. The economic statement is there. It outlines history, and it points out how well we're doing, relatively speaking, which is perfectly valid. But we do have our 2.8 billion. We may need to borrow up to 6 billion if Brexit goes badly, and with every day going past, it seems it's potentially more likely of a no deal than not. And a very small amount of fiscal space in the context of what we're talking about in terms of having to borrow if Brexit goes wrong. I think it is important that we have stability, and that's why our party is supporting and will support a budget subject to, obviously, the parameters outlined between Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael in the confidence supply agreement, and that has secured many things, including 1,600 new Gardaí, raised the old age pension, boosted third level funding, and I'm not going to list them all off. They're well documented and they're there. But we do have very uncertain times ahead. I wish you, Minister Darcy, and indeed Minister Donohoe and the government the very best in terms of how we're going to do this, but we really do have very uncertain figures ahead, potentially. Corporation tax is very, very unstable and yet welcome, but still, we keep finding extra money so that the Minister doesn't have to either borrow or cut other services to fund these overruns. But at some point in time, that curve is going to go the other way, and we're not going to keep finding more and more corporation tax, much as I might like it to be that way. And equally, interest rates are at a historic low, and the national debt is costing us less to service than it ever did in terms of the interest rate. And again, if interest rates change at any point, the Minister may not be as lucky or as fortunate as he's been so far. So I just think, Minister, we need to, in this House particularly, and equally in the Dáil, we need to be very cognizant and very committed to examining our figures. I didn't particularly like the reference on the government's website that it will outline, the summary economic statement gives the Dáil an opportunity to do this, that and the other. It never mentions the Seanad at all. It could have at least said the Oireachtas. But you know, it's true the Dáil is passed by the Dáil passes the budget, but we're here discussing summary economic statements. We have finance spokespersons here, we have senators on the finance committee, and I think there is a role for this House in debating the summary economic as we're doing now, and maybe the language of the department might reflect that in the longer term. But I suppose, just in conclusion, Minister, Fianna Fáil is there. We are facilitating the Fine Gael-led minority government, subject to the confidence supply agreement. We have secured various things within that. But I am very concerned about both corporation tax, particularly, and capital and revenue overruns, and I wish you well in tackling those issues. Thank you.